Relax, we got a few minutes. Start. I don't read lips well. Okay, why don't we go ahead and start? Okay. Good morning to everyone. Javier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. We just had a well-attended caucus meeting with Secretary of Health and Human Services Burwell with us. We had presentations by several of our colleagues on some important legislation. I'm joined by Leader Nancy Pelosi, Assistant Leader Jim Clyburn, Vice Chairman Joe Crowley, DCCC Chairman Ben Ray Luján, and we're going to be joined shortly, we hope, by an individual who can speak directly to some of the issues that we'll be discussing here, Ms. Anabel Dominguez. I want to begin by just acknowledging that in a time of tumult, it is important for us to convey to all the people in France our solidarity with them and our prayers and thoughts that we extend to the families and the victims from this past weekend's terrorist attack in Paris, France. Like France, we hold up the work that we do in this country to preserve freedom. We cherish our democracy, and we do everything we can to make this the land of the free, to make it a place where people will find home. And because we're a nation of immigrants, we make it very clear that if you come to work and build this country, you have a home. So in line with our history and our principle of being a nation of immigrants, we look at the system that we have in place today for immigration, and we see that our immigration system is broken in so many ways, and it is time to fix it. It is interesting at a time when our House Republican colleagues have called for a fresh start and have a new speaker, a fresh start with a fresh new speaker, Paul Ryan, that rather than give us a chance to begin a fresh start on something like immigration, which is operating under a broken system, that unfortunately we have word that we're not going to do anything on this side in the Congress, in the House. That, of course, ignores the fact that immigration reform would not only be good for our national security, it would be good for our economy, and it certainly would be good for all of our families who are here in the United States of America. We know that there would be more job growth if we fixed our broken immigration system. We know that we would decrease our federal budgets by having a system of immigration that works, and we know that we would strengthen programs like Social Security if we had an immigration system that worked. And along the lines of being a nation of immigrants, we must underscore that we respect and understand the need to be accepting of refugees into our country. People who, by definition, as refugees, must show that they fear death or persecution in order to have an opportunity to come into this country. 750,000 refugees have been resettled in America since 9/11. Not a one has been arrested on domestic terrorism charges in the United States of America. We are a nation of immigrants. We are a nation of laws. But we understand that to make our nation continue to work for all, we must reform our immigration system, which is severely broken. With that, let me yield now to our leader, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for a very productive House Democratic Caucus this morning. I want to associate myself with your remarks about extending our sympathies to the people of France. I also extend that to the people of Lebanon for the losses they suffered last week. France is our oldest friend, and as I wrote in the book yesterday at the embassy, France, our oldest friend. We extend sympathy and fraternity. When 9/11 hit, the French press said, "We are all Americans, we are all French now." As we approach the issues that are the source of concern there, we have to recognize that protecting people is our first responsibility. But we also cannot yield to terrorists whose goal is to instill fear and change who we are and our way of life. So I again associate myself further with your remarks. Today we are gathered in response to the Fifth Circuit's misguided decision, which was disappointing for families and communities across America. But we're glad for the opportunity to move forward and resolve this issue. Continuing to stall essential elements of the Immigration Accountability Executive Actions issued by President Obama only perpetuates a broken immigration system that tears families apart and fails to serve the national interest. We must not continue to defer the dreams of hardworking immigrant families who give so much to our communities. At our meeting this morning, our ranking member on the Immigration Committee, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California, a person who has been an immigration lawyer, taught immigration law, chaired the Immigration Committee, presented us with the option of signing an amicus brief in this case. One of the points that will be made in the brief is about precedent and of the president's authority. It's just stunning that people are saying that this president does not have this authority. Just as presidents before him, President Obama has broad authority to make our immigration system better meet the needs of our country and reflect our shared values. And every administration, Democratic or Republican, since President Dwight David Eisenhower has used executive authority to do just that. In the years immediately following the enactment, in fact, even when Congress has acted, our president is acting in the absence of congressional action. He is saying prefer that Congress act and pass comprehensive immigration reform. But in the absence of that, he has discreetly, using his authorities, taken his presidential executive actions. But even when Congress did act in 1986, it was called the 1986 Immigration and Reform and Control Act. President Ronald Reagan and following him, President George Herbert Walker Bush took bold action to protect the spouses and children of people who received status under that law. They said Congress did not go far enough, so they initiated family fairness initiatives, even after Congress acted. If President George W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, and President Ronald Reagan took those bold actions, how can you say, this court say, that this president doesn't have the authority to do exactly what they did? In fact, they affected a higher percentage of people than President Obama's actions. Although Congress explicitly chose not to grant status, as I said in the thing, to the people that President Reagan and President Bush extended it to, Presidents Reagan and Bush recognized that it was not in the national interest to separate families. God bless them for that. Especially as we approach Thanksgiving, we should remember the cruel impact of our broken immigration system on millions of families. We must rededicate ourselves to advancing comprehensive immigration reform that honors families and strengthens communities. While we remain confident that President Obama's executive actions will be upheld, they are no substitute for Congress acting to pass the comprehensive immigration reform to our nation so urgently needs. I just hope that we can move this forward. There have been some delaying, what I perceive to be delaying tactics on the part of the district court. I hope that this can move expeditiously so that it can be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in this coming session. It has to be done by sort of the end of April for them to proceed in that way. So this is really very important. It's been a year since the president took his action. It has all the legal authorities in the law, precedent by former presidents. This is a very misguided decision. It must be reversed. With that, I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished Assistant Leader, Mr. Clyburn. Mr. Clyburn?
Thank you very much, Madam Leader. Let me join with you and Chairman Becerra in expressing our tremendous grief over what is happening in France and Lebanon, and quite frankly, other places across the globe. I don't know of anyone, though, who will argue against the notion that our immigration system is broken. It is broken, and we have known that for a very long time, and we believe very strongly that what President Obama is attempting to do is put families first as we pursue how to respond to a broken system. Congress has a role to play, and for some strange reason, the majority has decided to kowtow to the Tea Party element and refuse to move forward to try and fix our immigration laws. And until Congress does, I think it is important for the president to do what is necessary to keep families together. And that is what he is attempting to do with this system. And it is not that he's acting outside of the law. I think that all of us are aware of the history that presidents have pursued in trying to keep families together and trying not to destroy communities and trying not to unfairly penalize law-abiding citizens. And so I'm pleased to stand today with my colleagues in support of the President, and I'm pleased now to yield the mic to the Vice Chair of our caucus, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Jim. I just want to as well express my condolences to the people of France, particularly the people of Paris, as well as the people of Lebanon and Turkey and elsewhere that have experienced acts of terrorism. This has not been obviously the first attack in this last year in France, but certainly the most deadly. And being from New York, I think we have always maintained a special bond between New York and Paris, and that has been further reinforced by this atrocious act against innocent lives. But I also want to take this opportunity this morning to talk about real-life experiences within my district as well. I have the opportunity and the great honor and pleasure to represent one of the most diverse districts in the United States today. And whether my constituents may be from Ireland or Mexico, Colombia, or Korea, I think one thing that bonds them all together is the potential for a knock at the door at night or being pulled over in a vehicle because of a taillight being out. That for many of us would be inconsequential, but for them can be a life-changing experience. One that potentially could rip a child's parents away from them and see them deported. That is a real-life fear for many of the people that I represent in the 14th Congressional District in Queens and Bronx, New York, and one that I think our fellow Americans understand is not keeping up with the principles of what we as Americans stand for. Not unlike my grandparents, who all came to this country for a better life for themselves and for their children. I dare say that I don't think any of my four grandparents would ever imagined in a generation that their grandson would be a member of the House of Representatives. They're no different in many respects for the people who are coming here today, seeking out that same opportunity to provide for their families, to give them a better life in the greatest country the world has ever known. That's a standard that we have proudly lived up to throughout our history, and one that I believe, unfortunately, many on the other side of the aisle are looking to further deteriorate. And we see even that rhetoric coming out in the aftermath of what took place in Paris. The quick knee-jerk response from our Republican colleagues, as opposed to a thoughtful, well-thought-out plan of how we deal with an ever-growing issue of people who are under duress and need relief. Instead, it's just simply turn their back. And that cannot be the America that we are. It's not the America that we are. We need to reevaluate that. I applaud what the President attempted to do. I believe the Fifth Circuit was wrong in the decision they made. But be that as it may, it's a calling to everyone, and especially to Mr. Ryan, the new Speaker, who I know has had an open ear on the issue of immigration reform, that now is the time to fix our broken immigration system. We need to address the undocumented who live in the United States today for national security purposes. We need to address the issue of the integrity of our border for national security purposes. We also have to understand the world that we're living in today and understand the ever-growing desire to be a part of the fabric of the United States, something that we cherish and we know others want to be a part of. We need to find a way to fix the broken legal immigration system that we have today as well. It's not working. And we need to take an opportunity. Now is the opportunity to do it. Now is the time to fix our broken immigration system. Don't let this languish any further. Deal with it now. We have a president who wants to do just that. And with that, I'm happy to yield the time to my good friend from New Mexico, Mr. Luján.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Good morning, everyone. And I want to join my colleagues by expressing my policies in the United States. We have to make sure that we work together, and Democrats are willing to work with our Republican colleagues to pass comprehensive immigration reform, to have a thoughtful conversation and debate. But yet, while we have a new speaker, we're hearing the same old tired excuses. And we still have a speaker who is unable or unwilling to stand up to the Freedom Caucus, to the most conservative arm of the Congress, to allow for even a debate on comprehensive immigration reform. Republicans, from the presidential candidates like Donald Trump to the House continue to alienate Latino voices, Hispanic voices through their ultra-conservative position on comprehensive immigration reform. Because Republicans in the House have refused to address this important issue, President Barack Obama took action just as every president since Eisenhower has done, including Presidents Reagan and both President Bushes. I'm hopeful the Supreme Court will review this case quickly. Every day that goes by, people have been part of our communities for years, contributing to the economy, paying taxes, will continue to live in fear. And even worse, families may be split up and broken up. Senator Rubio said doing nothing was de facto amnesty. Yet that's exactly what House Republicans have been doing. So time and again, when House Republicans have had an opportunity to support comprehensive immigration reform, to support dreamers, they have voted against them every time on the House floor. House Republicans have better coming up with some more solutions than coming up with excuses. And so that, Mr. Chairman, it's important that as we work together here, that it's long past time for House Republican leadership to allow a vote and a debate on comprehensive immigration reform. With that, I'll turn this back over to Chairman Becerra.
I don't know if Anabel Dominguez has arrived. No? I don't think she, I know she was caught in some traffic, so if she does have a chance to come before we close this press conference, we certainly will try to turn it over to her. No. So why don't we do this? We will open it up for questions, and if Ms. Dominguez arrives later, we can see about having her present as well. Any questions? Well, I think most of us respect the fact that the president has done everything to keep Americans safe, keep American troops safe, and make sure that if we get involved in any conflict, it's for the right reason. I will simply add, personally, my own opinion is that I'm not interested in voting to send American troops to fight a foreign civil war, but I am prepared to vote to send troops to a country if I find that those people in that country are prepared to fight for themselves. At this stage in Syria and Iraq, I will tell you that I have yet to see that the peoples of Syria and the peoples of Iraq are conducting themselves as a unified people ready to fight against a common enemy. And so for that reason, it's tough to me to see how we would want to go further than what our president has done. I think everything the president has done, from the airstrikes to coordination with our allies on the ground, to coordinating with France and our European partners and our regional partners to try to help those who are fighting ISIS. I think what we're doing is making every effort to make sure that ISIS is not only beaten back, as we've seen recently, as they are losing territory, but are ultimately defeated. I don't know if any of my colleagues wish to respond as well. Next question. Yeah, let's go here and then here.
There's talk that Mr. Ryan may bring out a Syrian refugee bill before this week. Is this something that needs to be done? And if not, is there something you can say to constituents who might be concerned about this?
So as I mentioned, you hate to be driven by fear, or perhaps things that are worse than fear, when it comes to how you treat people. I mentioned that some 750,000 refugees have come in since 9/11 into this country, and not a one has ever faced arrest for terrorism or some type of terrorist activity. The process that you must go through as a refugee to come into this country is extensive. It is long, and you must go through the most thorough of background checks. In fact, there is no form of person coming into the country from another land that requires more inspection, a more rigorous inspection than those who wish to qualify as refugees. And so I'm not sure what the legislation is that my Republican colleagues might introduce, but if it's simply a primordial reaction, then I would say that what we have to do is recognize that all Americans want to make sure that we do nothing to jeopardize our freedom and our security here. And we must do everything we can, not just in inspection and interrogation process or questioning process of anyone seeking refugee status, but in making sure that we avoid having anyone come to this country who might try to do us harm. We do everything we can to give the American people the sense that that is our job. But to then say that some child or a mother should be denied refugee status after going through a rigorous process to qualify, who has proven that she fears death, torture, persecution, would be such a sin on our American values that I think it's important before reacting much more to just say that we have to see what this legislation says. But if it says something about making the process more rigorous than what we already have, I think you're going to find a lot of people very receptive. But if it simply says shut the door to people who are in fear of their life and no more than that, when we have a track record of showing that we have a process that rigorously inspects these individuals, I think then that's a overreaction based on fear, perhaps hate, and I would hate to see that. See if my colleagues have a response as well.
In thinking about the first question as well, I just want to initially had no comment beyond what the chairman had said, but I do think it's important to point out that the first responsibility, I think, of the federal government is to protect the citizens of the United States from foreign invasion and from those who choose to harm us. I think the president is doing everything that he believes in conjunction and coordination with experts to address that issue. I think he's also said he's open to any suggestions or ideas that anyone may have that would be helpful in terms of further containing ISIL or Daesh in the region, and certainly to protect New Yorkers, Washingtonians, people who live in Omaha, Nebraska, everywhere in the United States. That is the responsibility, and I think we should all be working in that vein towards that. In terms of the reaction immediately in terms of Mr. Ryan's move to bring a bill so quickly to the floor, I wish we could have that same type of action in terms of the overall comprehensive immigration issue, which has languished, never brought to the floor, not a single bill brought to the floor to actually address the need for comprehensive reform for immigration. And instead, in a knee-jerk movement based on fear, and I would suggest politics. Politics. This is not a time for a political answer. This is a time for real answers and solutions. I understand the American people have fear. I understand that they are concerned about what happened in Paris and that may happen here. We all do. We're all human beings. But we need, as legislators and as lawmakers and as people with responsibility, to do it in a deliberate fashion and a smart fashion. And I haven't yet heard from any of the experts. We'll have a meeting today, a closed-door meeting today. I want to gather as much information as I possibly can before making or rushing to judgment or making those types of decisions. I think that's what the Republican leadership and the Speaker need to do as well.
Mike?
Just to put a finer point on that, so you would oppose it, because we haven't seen the legislation, but you would oppose something to scale back the expansion of the Syrian refugee program?
I think we're all open to find out if there's some ways to make the refugee program better, work smarter, protect those who are innocent, who are truly in fear of their life or their children's lives. I don't think any of us have any issue with that. We want to make sure that someone coming into this country has the right intentions. I think that's absolutely appropriate, and not only do the American people deserve it, they demand it. And there I think you're going to find every single member of Congress is supportive of that. Shutting the door of America completely to those who are seeking asylum or refuge is not our tradition. In fact, I think all of us can think of the one instance back in 1939 with the voyage of the St. Louis, where some 1,000 people were seeking refuge, people who were fleeing Nazi persecution because they were Jews. We turned that ship away, and as a result, we know that probably a fourth of those people perished in concentration camps. And so we're not talking about people who just want to come into this country, certainly not about people who want to do this country harm. We're not just talking about folks who, for even economic reasons, are trying to flee their home country. We're talking about people who have to prove that if they don't get refugee relief, they may die they may be tortured. And so I don't believe America intends to close its door to folks like that. I don't think the American people who are demanding that we provide them with the security that prevents an attack as we saw in Beirut and in Paris occur here. I believe the American people continue to recognize that some of them are the sons and daughters of those very refugees, and they want us to uphold our status as a democracy that fights for freedom for all, including those who seek refugee status.
I think we also have to recognize what ramifications of that will be. What message will be sent to Turkey? What message will be sent to Jordan, others within the region that we're asking to do their part? What message will be sent to Saudi Arabia, for instance, who doesn't do enough? Don't do any more. When there are people who are not threatened with economic disaster or political consequence, this is about rape, this is about beheading, this is about the wanton massacre, a genocide of people that we have to help prevent. And as the chairman has mentioned, there's a rigorous program that they have to go through in order to gain entry here into the United States. And I think we have to examine that. If there's something we can do to improve that, I think we ought to do that. If there's something we can do to further ensure and to root out the possibility of any terrorists entering the United States, of course we have to try to stop that as best we can. But I think to simply turn our backs is not the answer as well.
Laura.
Lauren, are you asking a question, or is that your statement? I would say first that it hurts to hear governors say, don't bring any of those folks into my state. First, there's a question as to whether or not the governor has any right to say that. In the United States of America, if you are here legally, if you are a citizen, you have the right to travel. And I don't believe a governor has a right to say, can't come into my state. Thank God for the Constitution, first. Secondly, for someone to say, you on this side of the room, yes, you'll be allowed in. You on the other side of the room, no, you will not. And therefore, your persecution may lead to your death. That, as a son of immigrants, that hurts. Where Mr. Bush got that idea, I have no idea. I am Christian. I'm Catholic. If you can easily say, we'll accept Christians but not Muslim, can we then say, as we did in 1939, we'll accept Christians but not Jews? Or if we're going to accept Christians, we'll accept them if they're Protestant but not if they're Catholic? The idea of refugee status is you fear persecution not because you're Jew, not because you're Christian or Muslim, but because you fear for your life. And if anyone, especially if you're running for office to the highest office in this land, by God, please explain yourself and stop profiling. Stop making people feel like they're bad simply because they happen to be coming from the same country that there's so much turmoil in. Do not paint people with a broad brush. We've seen the results of that from back in World War II and otherwise, and I think it's just the ugly part of this discussion is surfacing way too quickly, and I hope it changes. Yeah. At this stage, we'll have to hold off on that, but if there are any further questions, we'll try to take those as well. Any final questions? Yes.
Has there been any renewed talk of an
You know, and that's scary that as much as you hear the bellicose words of so many, the tough talk by so many who want to send your children, your son or daughter, to war, to fight a civil war in Syria or Iraq, those same people who are calling for us to send our troops, put them on the ground in combat, have yet to say, let's have the authorization to use military force so that Congress actually gives the constitutional authority for the president to do that. I find that to be cowardice on the part of those politicians who talk tough but won't vote tough, and certainly aren't willing to put their own relative sons and daughters first in line to go serve as boots on the ground before they're willing to send your family member, your son or daughter, to go fight in battle. Let me see if the Vice Chair has a response to that, and then maybe we'll take a quick word from Ms. Anabel Dominguez, who has joined us, who can talk about why it's so important that we treat the whole issue of immigration so seriously but so thoughtfully. Mr. Vice Chair.
Just very briefly, I think working under a 14-year-old AMUF is not acceptable. I think that was specifically for an event that took place 14 years ago, and against, quite frankly, a different entity. In this ever-changing world that we live in, that we need to update that AMUF, and that every member of Congress who was not here back then had the opportunity to express him or herself as to their belief, the direction the United States should take place, should go in. As the chairman said, it's one thing to speak bellicose and to use vibrato. It's another thing to actually have to put your vote where your mouth is. And I think every member of Congress, it's a difficult vote. It's not easy for any of us to take that vote in a position, but I think we have a responsibility and obligation to the American people to do that and not just simply go along and get along.
As difficult as it is sometimes to navigate entering this country, sometimes it's difficult to navigate being inside this country, and we're pleased, in this building, and we're glad that Ms. Dominguez was able to make it here. We'd like to hear from Ms. Anabel Dominguez a few thoughts on just how important it is to have a immigration system that works. Ms. Dominguez.
Bien, gracias. Good morning, everybody. My name is Anabel Dominguez. I am here today to represent millions of mothers and fathers like me that have been strangled for so long to come out of the shadows. We march because of the families depend on youth. They need to live without fears. We call we the poorest. When the President Obama announced DAPA and DACA, the expansions, 1 year ago, we cried. Because, and we mean that my husband, I am living with fears of deportation. My older son, Jose, will be able to achieve his dream of becoming a computer engineer. And my young son, Peter, will be able to have a stable family. And now that me will be all here in 2 years when they graduate from high school. We have struggled for so long and have so much to contribute to this country. The time is now to implement DACA and DAPA for my family and all the families that will the benefits for the executive this action. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sí. Buenos días, mi nombre es Anabel Domínguez, soy miembro de casa. Estoy aquí hoy en representación de millones de madres y padres que han luchado y siguen luchando para poder mantener a sus familias unidas, sin miedo de ser deportados y separados de sus hijos. Hace 15 años vine a los Estados Unidos con mi esposo, buscando un mejor futuro para nuestro hijo José. Pensamos que si trabajamos duro, podemos brindarle un mejor futuro económico de la pobreza que vivimos en México, mi país de origen. Mi hijo menor, Peter, es ciudadano americano. Él nunca ha conocido otro país. En 2 años va a graduarse de high school, donde participa en grupo de honores académicos y el club de robótica. Su hermano mayor, José, es uno de los soñadores, que también se beneficiaría por la acción ejecutiva del presidente Obama. No calificó por DACA cuando fue presentado en el 2012, pero estuvimos llorando de felicidad hace 1 año cuando el presidente anunció su extensión a DACA. José calificaría. Desde su graduación en el 2014, ha estudiado y espera graduarse en junio de Community College para buscar su licenciatura en Ingeniería e Informática en la Universidad de Maryland. En su tiempo libre es voluntario, con proyectos de resolver conflictos y mejorar la comunidad con proyectos de arte. Mi familia ya es americana, pero seguimos en las sombras. Estamos luchando, trabajando y pagando nuestros impuestos. Mis hijos son parte del presente y una esperanza para el futuro de nuestra ciudad y de este país. En un par de años, mi hijo menor tendrá derecho de voto como cualquier ciudadano americano. Estoy aquí hoy junto con líderes del Congreso para recordar a los jueces y congresistas que ya es hora de implementar DAPA y expandir DACA. Nuestras familias no pueden esperar más. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Ms. Dominguez, for those words. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for figuring out a way to raise your children in the shadows, and thank you for making it clear why we want to move forward. Any final questions, including for Ms. Dominguez?
I just kind of wonder if you guys see any common thread between the reaction to DACA, DAPA, sanctuary cities with this timely case, and now the reaction to the Paris attacks.
I think clearly what all of this manifests is that there is a need to have a system that works properly, whether it's our refugee system, making sure that it's rigorous and robust and making sure that only those who qualify come into the country. And I think you'd have to say that so far our system has worked very well, and moving forward we'll do everything to make sure it's even tighter if necessary. But certainly with regard to someone like Ms. Dominguez, who has built this country and is building a future for her kids, we need a system that works right. For her to be here for 15 years shows you that we have to move forward because of people and families who have made this their home for the right reasons. And so we hope to be able to have reform that deals in a comprehensive way, whether it's refugee status, asylum issues, or immigration through the visa process, or in dealing and addressing in a righteous way the 11 million people who are in this country without documents. It's time to do our work, not just say we're not going to deal with it right now. And so we're looking forward to having Ms. Dominguez smile as her son graduates and gets ready to go on to college.
I'd only add to that Mr. Ryan has made it clear that he would like to bring regular order back to the process. Is an opportunity now. This bill, this concept of comprehensive immigration reform has languished. The Senate acted in the last Congress, yet the House never brought it up, despite the promises by then Speaker Boehner that the bill or something would be brought to the floor. Nothing ever was. They talk about not trusting the president. Well, who can trust them? They never brought any of the bills, any bill, forward that they promised to bring before the House of Representatives. They talk about trust. You know, when you point the finger at someone, there's three pointing back.
With that, thank you all very much. Gracias. Qué bueno que llegó.